to it. Incidentally, I have to admit, and I've said this before, that the previous candidate, Marshall, he had some competence, and I've said so. I mean, he's well qualified. I mean, he has a degree, I believe, in economics, a degree in law, and I always respected his competence. And what they have done now is that they have literally removed one of their most viable candidates, because our polls would have shown that Marshall stood a chance of winning, and I would have said so too. They now apparently replace him with one of Harold's drinking buddies. And I say buddy now in inverted commas. So again, you can see that a more qualified team here in the Antigua and Barbuda party. Now, I have to tell you though, I felt that, they gave Marshall, and you're not holding any brief, Marshall, but UPP really should not have eliminated a candidate based on the fact that the person may have had one or two NCDs. There are times when people with NCDs maybe become negligent and, they have fainting spells and so on. I've seen that with Sylvester, especially when in opposition, he just wasn't eating properly. I recall us going out, Sylvester will power down 2 burgers, and he was a diabetic, and he had several fainting spells. And I recall too, people tell you that even when we were fighting each other for leadership, I remember on one occasion we had a meeting at Sandpiper, and Sylvester fainted. I was the first there to help him, and we gave him something sweet to drink and so on, revive him, because we really cared, for our people, especially the senior ones in the party, and for them to cannibalize Cortwright Marshall the way they did. I think that Harold has shown himself to be a most uncaring person. I mean, Harold must have 1 or 2 or several NCDs. It is almost impossible for anyone who approaching the 60s not to have at least a single NCD. I would have given you all an example in terms of my own situation with cholesterol. And truth be told, if I don't eat properly, I mean, I will have a problem with NCDs. And it is almost natural for most of us, maybe because of the type of genes that we have. There's some who argue that our genes may have mutated during that period of over the 400 years that we had to be eating all these salty foods and fatty foods, as well as starchy and sugary foods. But at that time, our forebears were working, on the plantations, and they're burning the energy. Today, we're not as active, and apparently we have been socialized to eat a lot of food. So invariably, by the time you hit about 50, you start to get NCDs. I mean, I recall I had no issue with anything up to my late 40s, when everything became started to get a little marginal, even blood pressure and so on start to rise and get up to 80 something, to the extent that Joey placed me on a low dose of Predirex to make sure that it's kept down. And even when I did my last test, it was like about 70 something over 120, which is acceptable. But you see, and I'm saying all this too, it's not a boast, just to share information with the public, because sometimes too you get a lot of flawed and false information in the public. I recall as a young man in my 20s and 30s and so on, you hear people saying if you take blood pressure tablets, you'll not be able to get an erection and so on. It's totally untrue. In fact, if you don't manage your blood pressure, then obviously you'll be exposing your organs to a lot of damage. So we have to manage our NCDs and to live a healthy lives. And people who have NCDs can lead healthy lives. The issue is about managing those diseases. So for them to use that and to weaponize it against Cortwright Marshall, I think that's a new low. I mean, they may want to compare him with somebody like Tico. Tico had a life-threatening situation, which his organs were failing, especially his kidneys. In fact, Tico had to get a kidney replacement in order to survive. So at that time, we had to ask him to stand down. And truth be told, too, he was not even competitive because he was so sick he couldn't campaign. So he had lagged behind. And when we look at the combination of the fact that he was losing and that he was ill, we had to ask him to step down. But this was a total emasculation of someone who we know for a fact, and I'm saying scientifically because we polled him as a viable candidate. I mean, I'm not complaining because, clearly, Comrade Samantha Marshall now has an easier target. Not that she's going to take him for granted, but what I don't like is the type of discrimination that has taken place, and a discrimination led by someone who himself has NCDs. And there are other people in the UPP who have conditions that are far
This is
worse
NTP
than
Newsroom.
Marshall. I mean, it's well known, for example, with Serpent. I mean, with his heart condition and so on, and other issues that he has. And again, it's not that I want to be discussing people's health situation. What I'm saying here is that we should not be using the illness of individuals to discriminate against them, and that is where I feel that Marshall got a rotten deal.